I yield to my friend Steve King.
I thank the gentleman from Texas for yielding, and I have no better friend in this city either, or this country for that matter. And I'm just called to come to this floor to add a few words in, Mr. Speaker, to the topic that the gentleman from Texas has courageously brought forward and so few others would want to even speak to. This societal experiment that's going on in our military, the greatest military in the history of the world. And when the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Gomer, talks about how history will be written one day, this isn't a civilization killer, but it's an indication of a civilization killer. I think of the circumstances in a little bit older history, back in the 16th century and the 17th century, when the Ottoman Empire and the Muslim armies were sweeping across the countryside, and whoever they captured, they pressed into slavery. And when they pressed them into slavery, they wanted to have their crack troops. They were called janissaries. And there were other troops too as well. But what they did in order to keep them from reproducing was that they did reassignment surgery on those slaves that they captured that they had put into their janissary troops. And that reassignment surgery was they took them from being a virile reproductive male into being a eunuch. Now, they were suitable to work in the harem, but they found out when they put them out in the field to do battle against the enemy that they didn't have the testosterone to take on the fight. And so over a period of time, a generation or two, they finally realized, I guess we're going to have to stop turning these men into eunuchs if we're going to have them as a fighting machine. That's the janissaries. And there's the old history through that is replete with narrative after narrative of them taking out the knife and actually cutting these anatomically complete men off flush. Some would die from that, and some would live, but none of them had the will to fight. And so they decided that they were going to keep anatomically complete men that were producing testosterone, in their crack janissary troops where they fought well. That's a lesson of the military, the Ottoman military from 200, 300, 400 years ago. And today, we're here thinking somehow we're going to make the military better by letting people line up at the recruitment center who have planned that they want to do sexual reassignment surgery, know that it's expensive, and believe if I can just get into any branch of the United States services, to the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, the Marines, maybe become a Navy SEAL, and then submit to sexual reassignment surgery and go from a man to a woman. By the way, it doesn't look like there's going to be any women going to men after they go through SEAL training. I don't think that's going to happen, at least in the current. But there's no way that this enhances the capabilities of our military. There's no way it enhances the morale of our military. And you'll never see a platoon that's made up all of the folks that are likely to line up to sign up into our military. This policy, clearly enacted, clearly advertised, is a neon sign for people that want to have sexual reassignment surgery. They will line up at the recruiter's office, and they'll go into the military, and they'll be saying, the military will be saying, you know, we had to turn this person away because they were too heavy, and this one had flat feet, and this one had a bad eye, and this one had a congenital defect of one kind or another. But if they don't have those and they want sexual reassignment surgery, we'll cut them up and remake them into something different to the tune of $3.5 or $9 billion over a 10-year period of time, and put them off in the recovery room for 2 years before we can put them to work and use them. And by the way, they're likely then to be discharged to come back into society if their only purpose was to get the free surgery. And can you imagine? Can you imagine someone that has now gone into Walter Reed Hospital, taken up a bed in Walter Reed Hospital, maybe a roommate with someone who was hit by an IED, someone who lost a couple of legs, amputated in the service, in the dangerous, dangerous service of the freedoms of our country? Can you imagine those two beds side by side? And one of them missing a couple of legs, or an arm and a leg, or two arms, and the other one saying, well, I just came in for sexual reassignment surgery. I won't say the next thing's in my mind. I think the public understands the image of what this is. This is one of the most appallingly stupid things I've ever seen the United States Congress do. And it's got some competition, but I don't even know what's second. It's so bad. And the long-term thinking of this, the implications of this are awful, Mr. Speaker. We need to reverse this somehow. I would add also that Bob Gates, who's former Secretary of Defense, testified before the United States Congress that we had an obesity problem with our young people in America that is a national security risk. It's a national security concern, and we ought to be adopting Michelle Obama's Healthy and Hunger-Free Kids Act that cut the calories down on these kids because we didn't have enough of them that were available to meet the physical standards to get into the military, and it was a national security risk. Those are his exact words, a national security risk. Well, if we can put the kids on a diet in school because it's a national security risk for getting people to meet the weight standards of our military, isn't this a national security risk when you have all of these resources that are redirected from F-35s and pension plans and a raise for our military and housing on our bases, and the list goes on and on? Redirect those resources to sexual reassignment surgery, and then have them mustered out of the service as soon as they get what they went into the service for in their first place. This is idiocy on the part of the United States Congress. I salute Vicki Hartzler for introducing this amendment. I had a similar amendment that was turned down in the Rules Committee, but this is something this Congress made a significant error on. 24 Republicans and every single Democrat voted against this. So I thank the gentleman from Texas for bringing up the topic, and I would be happy to yield back to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Bowman.